Hello everyone. I am delighted to welcome you all today. Today we are going to explore a very useful resource for our history class. The title of our presentation is Question Bank in Social Science, History, Class IX, Term II. We will go through what this question bank includes, how it can help you prepare better, and some tips to make the most of it. So let's get started and make our learning journey more effective and engaging. Let's take a closer look at the role of peasants and farmers in this period. They were absolutely central to the economy and society, as they provided the food and agricultural products that sustained everyone. Peasants and farmers often had a complex relationship with the land and their rulers, balancing their own needs with the demands of landowners or the state. It's important to understand that their work wasn't just about farming. It was deeply connected to social structures and obligations. Many of these peasants were bound by various forms of serfdom or tenancy, which affected their freedom and economic stability. Highlighting these points helps us see how the broader political and social changes impacted everyday lives. The struggles and resilience of peasants and farmers played a significant role in shaping the outcomes of this era, linking directly to the overall theme of societal transformation we're exploring in this presentation. Let's talk about peasants and farmers. These groups have always been the backbone of agricultural societies. They are the ones who work the land, tend the crops, and raise the livestock that sustain entire communities. Their work is often hard and overlooked, but it's absolutely vital. Understanding their role helps us see how agriculture shaped social structures and economies throughout history. Farmers and peasants also faced many challenges, from limited resources to changing political landscapes. Recognizing their contributions gives us a fuller picture of historical development and how societies have evolved over time. This theme of everyday labor and resilience ties into the larger story of societal progress we're exploring today. Let's delve into how dependency on machines, like the thresher, played a significant role during this period. During the Napoleonic Wars, the thrashing machine was introduced to reduce reliance on manual labor and to boost agricultural productivity. However, when the wars ended, many soldiers returned home only to find there was little work available for them. At the same time, an agricultural depression took hold, leading to an oversupply of food and a surplus of laborers who were suddenly unemployed. Now, this shift had profound effects on the farmers, especially the poor. They no longer had access to common lands that they traditionally relied on. Many were displaced from their lands, and their customary rights started to disappear. As a result, work became uncertain and insecure, and their income became unstable, making life increasingly difficult for them. This brings us to the enclosures, a key development during this period. Enclosures led to increased food grain production, which kept pace with the rapidly growing population. In fact, England was producing nearly 80% of the food grains it consumed. Thanks to innovations like crop rotation techniques, crop yields improved significantly. Enclosures allowed landowners to expand the land under their control, cultivating more for the market and boosting overall production. From the mid-18th century onwards, enclosures shifted their focus towards grain cultivation. As Britain's population grew and industrialization accelerated, people moved to cities in search of work. With fewer people available for farming, the land needed to produce more grains to meet the rising demand. This caused food grain prices to rise, encouraging landowners to enclose more land and dedicate larger areas to grain production. It's important to note that this shift did not happen overnight. Since the 16th century, wool had also become a major focus. Farmers began to enclose fields to improve sheep breeds and ensure better grazing. These enclosed fields replaced the traditional open fields, transforming the landscape of England. Speaking of open fields, let's remember that peasants traditionally cultivated strips of land near their villages. These strips varied in quality, which was a deliberate measure to distribute good and bad land fairly among farmers. Beyond these strips was common land, used by everyone for grazing cattle, gathering fruits and berries, or collecting firewood. The concept of open fields and common land was integral to rural life, providing shared resources that benefited the community as a whole. However, as enclosures became more widespread, These traditional arrangements were gradually replaced by enclosed fields, fundamentally changing the rural landscape and social fabric of England. During the time of enclosed fields in England, in the USA, the white American settlers were initially confined to a small, narrow strip in the east. As time went on, especially by the early 20th century, these Americans began moving westward, seeking new opportunities. America was widely seen as a land of promises, a place where anyone could achieve their dreams. However, this westward expansion came at a cost to the American Indians, who were forced to give up their land and move further west. Meanwhile, the white Americans who moved westward started clearing land, cultivating wheat, and turning the plains into productive farmland. This movement helped shape America into a major breadbasket, but it also led to challenges like the Dust Bowl, which had devastating environmental and economic impacts. These developments highlight the complex story of America's growth, full of promise, but also fraught with struggles and consequences. So, starting from the late 19th century, we see a noticeable population increase, which naturally led to greater demand for food, especially staples like wheat. At the same time, the export market for wheat was expanding significantly, turning wheat into a major commodity on the global stage. This growing demand meant that countries needed more wheat to feed their populations and support their economies. However, things took a turn when wheat supplies from Russia, traditionally a huge exporter, were cut off. This disruption heightened the demand even further, creating shortages and driving up prices. Then, during the First World War, the wheat market really boomed. With many countries involved in the war, the need for wheat in Europe and elsewhere surged, leading to a sharp increase in production and trade. This entire sequence of events ties into the broader theme of how global events and economic shifts influence agricultural markets. It also sets the stage for understanding later issues like the bread basket and Dust Bowl, which further affected wheat production and supply. Now, on this slide, we're looking at a significant shift in agricultural technology. New inventions were introduced with the goal of increasing production efficiency. We saw the rise of tractors, disc plows, mechanical reapers, and combine harvesters, among other innovations. These tools revolutionized farming by making it faster and less labor-intensive. This wave of technological advancement was part of a broader effort to boost food supplies and support a growing population. However, it also had some unintended consequences, like the emergence of the Dust Bowl. As farms expanded and native grasses were removed to make way for crops, the land became more vulnerable to erosion, especially during droughts. This period underscores how technological progress can dramatically change the landscape, both literally and figuratively, influencing the economy and the environment. It's a crucial chapter in understanding how modern farming practices evolved and the challenges they brought along. So here we see how machines initially seemed like a solution for farmers, but in reality, they brought a lot of misery. Many farmers bought these machines on credit, often loans they couldn't repay later on. This led to financial trouble for many. Finding jobs became even more difficult as the economy worsened. As production increased, a surplus of wheat developed, which caused prices to drop significantly. This decline in prices hurt farmers' income and also impacted export markets negatively. Ultimately, the Great American Depression in the 1930s devastated the farmers, leaving many struggling to survive. This slide highlights how technological progress, combined with economic downturns, had severe consequences for the agricultural community. It's a stark reminder of how interconnected economic and environmental issues can be, especially during tough times like these. In the 1930s, we saw some of the most devastating dust storms in history. These storms weren't just a nuisance, they caused real destruction. They killed cattle and wiped out vast areas of land, making farming incredibly difficult. The root of the problem was that farmers had cleared away the natural grass cover, which normally protected the soil. Without that grass, large areas of land became bare and dry. Over time, the rich sod that held the soil together broke apart into dust, which was then easily carried away by the wind. This period is often called the Dust Bowl, and it had a huge impact on the American breadbasket, which was known as the breadbasket. It's a stark reminder of how land management and environmental health are so interconnected, and it ties into our overall theme of understanding the importance of sustainable practices in agriculture. Now, let's look at how opium production in India was closely linked to British trade with China. Essentially, Western merchants wanted to balance their trade with China, which meant they needed a commodity that could be sold there. So, they looked for something that the Chinese would buy in large quantities. The English, for example, were purchasing tea from China, which was very popular, but they needed something to pay for it. The Chinese, on the other hand, were eager to buy opium, which was grown in India. This created a trade flow where Indian farmers produced opium, which was then sold to the Chinese. This connection highlights how trade interests drove the production of opium in India, and it also shows the broader economic patterns at play during this period. It's a key point because it helps us understand the economic motivations behind the opium trade and how it was intertwined with colonial interests. So, in the context of the overall presentation, this illustrates the complex relationships between Indian agriculture, colonial trade policies, and global markets, all of which had profound impacts on Indian society and economy. Now, let's look at how the Indian peasants were compelled to grow opium during this period. The British government essentially forced them to cultivate opium crops, making it a part of their agricultural routine. What's particularly striking is that the government then purchased this opium from the farmers at very nominal rates, which means the farmers didn't get fair compensation for their hard work. This system highlights how the British prioritized their economic interests over the well-being of local farmers. It also connects to the larger theme of exploitation and economic control that characterized colonial rule in India. The source of this opium was India itself, an important point to remember as it underscores how deeply intertwined Indian agriculture was with the global opium trade during that era. So, what we see here is that the British noticed something quite significant. Opium production in their own territories was actually declining, while in areas outside their control, it was on the rise. This was a clear sign that the trade was shifting. Traders, seeking to maximize profits, started selling opium directly to China, bypassing traditional routes. This situation forced the British to step in and establish a monopoly over the opium trade to control and regulate it better. But managing this trade wasn't simple. It required careful oversight and attention to detail. Interestingly, the rates paid to the Indian farmers for cultivating opium were very low, making the trade less attractive for them. Plus, opium cultivation demands fertile land that farmers might prefer to use for food crops or other profitable ventures. Many farmers were actually unwilling to produce opium. They had various reasons, some because they didn't want to grow a crop that could be harmful, others because the low payments didn't compensate for the effort and resources involved. This reluctance among Indian cultivators played a significant role in shaping the overall dynamics of the opium trade, highlighting the complex relationship between the British, local farmers, and global markets. Let's talk about summative assessment. This is the final piece of the puzzle in evaluating learning. It's designed to measure what students have actually learned after a unit or course has been completed. Think of it as the big picture review. It captures the overall understanding and mastery of the content. These assessments are usually formal, like exams, final projects, or comprehensive papers. They help us determine whether learning objectives have been achieved. Importantly, summative assessments connect to the bigger goals of education, ensuring that the skills and knowledge we aim to develop are actually being acquired. They also inform decisions about grades, progression, and future instruction. In the context of our overall presentation, they remind us of the importance of balancing ongoing formative feedback with these final evaluations to support student success and continuous improvement. A peasant woman was much at ease with the open field system. The common land was a boon for her, improving her financial position. A peasant woman, often involved in farming and daily work, found the open fields beneficial because they provided her with access to land for cultivation and other resources. a laborer worked on the land. He was satisfied with the open field system, which allowed him not only land for cultivation, but also access to common land. This system meant that workers like laborers could share the land and resources, making farming more accessible and sustainable for them. The rich farmer was not unhappy with the system as it had been prevalent for long, and hence he accepted it. However, he could not claim land by enclosing it, which was a significant limitation for landowners wanting to privatize and profit more from their land. Overall, in 18th century England, the open field system was vital for rural people. It provided communal access to land, supported their livelihoods, and shaped their way of life. While it had its advantages, especially for small farmers and laborers, it also laid the groundwork for later debates about land rights and enclosure. From the 16th century onwards, we see a significant shift in the economy related to open fields and common lands. This change was largely driven by economic incentives, especially the rising price of wool. As wool became more profitable, wealthy farmers started to expand their wool production. They aimed to improve sheep breeds and ensure better feed for their flocks, which meant they needed to control larger areas of land. To do this efficiently, they preferred to have their land in compact blocks rather than scattered plots. This shift laid the groundwork for the enclosure movement, which fundamentally transformed the rural landscape and farming practices in England. The poor felt that if thrashing machines were used in farms, there would be no need for manual labor. They believed that these machines would replace their jobs, leaving them unemployed. This opposition was driven by the fear of losing livelihood and the economic insecurity that came with technological changes. It's important to understand that during this time, many farmers and workers depended on manual labor for their income. So, when new machinery like thrashing machines appeared, it wasn't just about technology. It was about people's lives and their survival. This resistance reflects the broader theme of how technological advancements can create social tensions, especially when they threaten traditional ways of earning a living. Now, let's talk about Captain Swing. This was a mythical name used in various letters and communications during a period of social unrest. It wasn't a real person, but rather a symbol or a character representing a group of people. These individuals were mostly poor peasants and agricultural workers who were concerned about losing their livelihoods due to mechanization in farming. They feared that new machinery like threshers and steam engines would replace their manual work, leading to unemployment and hardship. So, the name Captain Swing became a way for these protesters to voice their fears and frustrations. It also became a symbol of their collective resistance against the changes that threatened their way of life. This story highlights how social and economic anxieties can lead to protests, even if the figures involved are more symbolic than literal. The westward expansion truly transformed the landscape of America. It turned the grasslands into what we now call the breadbasket of the country. As settlers moved west, they drove the American Indians further westward, often displacing them from their traditional lands. At the same time, they cleared large areas of land to make way for farming and cultivation. This process was crucial in shaping the agricultural economy of the United States and played a significant role in its growth. But it also had profound impacts on the native populations and the environment. So, in essence, westward expansion helped build the foundation of America's agricultural strength, while also transforming the social and cultural landscape of the nation. Now let's look at slide 19. It shows that both options A and B are correct, meaning that the answer is C. This slide is part of a series of questions exploring the historical reasons behind land dispossession and social changes. For instance, one key question asks why white settlers wanted to push away Indian Americans from their lands. The correct answer is all of the above, indicating multiple reasons contributed to this process. These reasons include economic motives, territorial expansion, and cultural dominance. Another important point covered in this series is the disappearance of certain practices by 1800, which drastically affected laborers' lives. The answer here is both A and B, showing that multiple practices, like traditional crafts or labor systems, were phased out together. The slide also touches on the mobility of pastoral communities, highlighting that their continuous movement helped sustain their livelihoods and adapt to changing conditions. The methods used to oust Indian Americans involved various strategies, including legal, military, and social pressures, all of which are encompassed by the answer all of the above. Finally, before the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the English countryside was characterized by common ground, shared lands used collectively by communities. This shift from common land to enclosed private property was driven by a frantic effort to enclose lands in Britain, often for agricultural efficiency or profit. Overall, this slide emphasizes how land policies, social practices, and colonial expansion were interconnected, shaping societies in profound ways. Now, let's look at some important concepts related to land use and farming practices. First, we have commons. This refers to land that originally belonged collectively to villagers and was used for activities like grazing livestock, collecting fuel, and gathering food. It was shared community land that supported everyone's livelihood. Moving on, we have enclosing. This is the process of building hedges or fences around individual holdings to mark property boundaries. While it might seem like a simple way to organize land, it often had a negative impact, especially on poorer farmers, because it deprived them of access to the commons they previously relied on. Finally, agriculture encompasses the science and practice of farming, cultivating land for growing crops and raising animals. It's the foundation of food production and essential for supporting populations. Understanding these terms helps us see how land use has evolved over time, and how these changes affected communities and farming practices. The poor farmers felt that the thrashing machines would replace people. They were worried that these machines would take away their jobs and make them unemployed. This fear came from the idea that machines could do the work that many farmers used to do by hand. As a result, they believed that their livelihoods were at risk. This concern was part of a larger theme during the Industrial Revolution, where new machines changed traditional ways of working and created anxiety about job security. The farmers felt that progress might benefit others, but for them, it meant losing their means of earning a living. The Confucian rulers were quite suspicious of foreign merchants. They feared that these merchants might interfere in local politics or bring ideas that could threaten their authority. This suspicion led to a cautious approach towards foreign trade. Now, regarding the Manchus, you might wonder why they were unwilling to allow the entry of foreign goods into China. Well, their main concern was protecting the local economy and maintaining stability. They wanted to control the flow of foreign goods to prevent economic disruption and also to preserve Chinese traditions and values. So, in essence, both the Confucian rulers and the Manchus prioritized political stability and cultural integrity over open foreign trade. This cautious stance was a way to safeguard their power and the societal structure they aimed to uphold. The open fields and commons, which were once a vital part of rural life, gradually disappeared during the enclosure movement between 1750 and 1850. This was a period of significant change, where large landowners restructured the way land was used, consolidating smaller strips into larger, fenced-in fields. As a result, many common lands that villagers relied on for grazing and farming were enclosed and privatized. This transformation changed the landscape forever, leading to more efficient agriculture, but also displacing many small farmers and altering traditional rural communities. It's a key example of how economic and social shifts during this period dramatically reshaped the English countryside, fitting into the broader theme of industrialization and modernization. During the Napoleonic Wars, we saw a significant increase in food prices, which really impacted farmers. To meet the rising demand, farmers started to expand their production. However, with this increased scale, they also faced a looming concern, a potential shortage of labor. To address this challenge, farmers began to invest in thrashing machines. These machines were crucial because they could perform the work of many laborers, reducing their dependence on manual labor. This shift towards mechanization was driven by the need to sustain higher production levels efficiently and to safeguard their livelihoods in a time of economic uncertainty. It's a key moment where technological innovation begins to shape agricultural practices, setting the stage for future industrial advancements. After the Napoleonic Wars, we saw a significant change in the agricultural landscape. Returning soldiers entered the workforce, creating a labor surplus, which meant more people competing for fewer jobs. At the same time, Europe was flooding the market with grain, leading to a sharp fall in prices. This caused an agricultural depression, hitting farmers hard and making it difficult for them to make a living. As prices dropped and hardships grew, farmers and rural workers began to feel the pressure, which led to unrest. One notable expression of this unrest was the Captain's Swing riots. These protests were directly linked to the introduction of thrashing machines, which, rather than helping, symbolized the tough times for the poor. Many saw these machines as a threat to their livelihoods, fearing they would lose jobs or income. So, the Captain's Swing movement was essentially a reaction to the economic struggles caused by the agricultural depression. It reflected the broader social and economic tensions of the time, highlighting how technological change and falling prices put immense pressure on rural communities. This slide helps us understand how economic shifts can trigger social upheaval, a theme that runs throughout this period of history. After the American War of Independence, white settlers began moving westward across the continent. They aimed to carve out fertile lands for farming and settlement. This movement was driven by the desire for agricultural benefits and economic opportunity. As they expanded, they pushed American Indians further west, often forcibly, to make room for this new wave of settlers. This westward expansion played a significant role in shaping the country's history, but it also led to the displacement of native communities and numerous conflicts. It's a key part of understanding how the United States grew geographically and socially during this period. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. As we've seen, the structured approach to the content helps us understand and retain the key information effectively. Each section reflects the hierarchy established in the original material, ensuring we don't miss any vital insights. Now, turning to the historical impact of mechanized farming. While it boosted productivity, it also had significant social and environmental consequences. The shift led to job losses for small farmers, many of whom struggled with mounting debts. Additionally, intensive plowing disrupted the land's natural stability, contributing to devastating dust storms, famously known as the Dust Bowl. This highlights some of the problems associated with the expansion of wheat farming in the USA. It wasn't just about increasing food production, it also brought ecological and economic challenges. These issues remind us that technological progress must be balanced with sustainable practices to avoid long-term harm. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this overview helps you see the broader picture and the interconnectedness of these historical developments.